TJ here from 454 Bags, and today I want to go over the 454 10 to 14 day dry, cure, trim, out the door process. Now this process is set up more for the commercial style farm who might be processing a larger amount of cannabis. Maybe they have a limited drying space, a staggered harvest, or maybe you just need to get some money in the door and you got a buyer ready and you want to get it out as quick as possible. So this 10 to 14 day process is the quickest way we know of to get it from harvest to sale without risking any degradation of the product. Maintain that great nose, that look, that bag appeal that's going to make your buyers happy and your end users even happier. So let's jump right into it. All right, step one of the process is the drying process. And your dry is only going to be as good as the environment that you're drying in. And so what we want to maintain in our drying environment is a 60 to 65 degree temperature and 60% relative humidity. Now, depending on where you're located, how big your drying space is, and how many plants you're hanging, that's going to decide how much dehumidification you need, whether you need a heater, whether you need an air conditioner, and all that. So getting your room figured out might take a little tweaking, but we want to maintain 60 to 65 temp, 60% relative humidity. If we can do that, we're going to dry our plants as quick as possible without risking over drying or speed drying, and we're going to dry quick enough that we get out of that risk for the mold and the mildew. Now, in 5 to 7 days, I want you to realize that we're not going to have a product that's smokable dry, sellable dry just yet, but we have a product that's ready to move on to the next phase. It's also important to remember we're shooting for 5 to 7 days, but if you're harvesting some 8-foot outdoor monsters and hanging them, those are obviously going to retain a lot more moisture than an indoor or a greenhouse plant, and they may take a little longer than 5 to 7 days. Now, how do we know when we're ready to go to the next phase? Well, what we want is we want a snap. So we want to take one of our buds, and where the stem attaches to the bud, we want to be able to snap that. If it's still bending and we're not getting a good snap, then we're going to need to keep drying for a little bit. But once you get that snap, that's your indicator you're ready to go to the next step. Okay, step 2 of the process is the curing process. And once you get that stem snap, you're ready to move on to curing. And what's happening in the curing process is basically what we're doing is we're allowing the plant material to break down, turn into CO2, and be released. And what that does is going to bring out the cannabis terpenes and the cannabis flavor profiles, which is what we want to get that good nose and that good taste. So with that snap, we're going to buck down into lined totes. Lining your totes is important for quality control reasons. And even if you have a state that doesn't require it, it's definitely recommended. Just number one, if you're putting in a gassy strain, take it out, and then you're putting in a fruity strain. You don't want to get that contamination of terpenes and mixing up flavor profiles. Also, if you put in a batch that has a disease, mold, mildew, something like that, you pull it out and you put the next batch in, you're risking that cross-contamination. A tote liner is also going to simplify the burping process for you immensely. And if you aren't using a tote liner, you're definitely going to need to be cleaning, disinfecting after each round, after each batch comes in and out, which takes time and is actually expensive to buy all that stuff. So a tote liner is going to save you money, save you time. These are our tote liners. They come on a easy dispensing roll of 125 liners. They pull right out. No mess getting the bag out. You're ready to go. So we're going to buck down into our tote. And bucking down, if you're not familiar, is just the process of cutting the buds away from the plant. And what we're doing is we're separating the buds, which are going to be the most dry on the plant, and getting rid of the thick stems that are going to be holding the most amount of moisture. So now we can continue our drying and start curing. When you fill up your totes, we only want to go about 3/4 of the way up, and we want that pocket of air on the top, which is going to allow some circulation from the inside. And one of the reasons that totes are so good for the curing process is they are not a complete 100% airtight environment, although they're close. There will be some air transfer allowed through the lid under here, which is perfect for where we're at in the drying curing stage. So also it's good if you have the space in your drying room to leave your totes curing in there, because you have that 60-60 60-degree temperature, 60% humidity. If you need that space to start drying the next batch, keep your totes in a dark area as close to that 60-60 as you can get. It's going to help you out a lot. So now, once the buds are in, the lid's on, we are in the curing process, and now we need to start thinking about burping. In the beginning, because the buds are going to be holding more moisture than later on, we want to burp every 3 to 4 hours for 3 to 4 minutes. Burping's super simple. You're just going to come through, take the lid off, and what that's going to do is it's going to allow any moisture that's evaporated off into our little air pocket and any CO2 from the broken down plant matter to escape. Now, I told you the tote liners would help a lot in the burping process, and the way that they do is normally you might have to put your hand in and kind of sift to get buds from the middle and the bottom to the top to really mix it up and let stuff air out. But with the tote liner, we don't have to stick our hands in. Just pull one side off and you can kind of reach under and just agitate a little with your hand and mix it up. It's going to save you a lot of time, and it's a lot more efficient. So once we do that, we're going to leave the lid off for 3 to 4 minutes to let all that moisture, all that CO2 get out. Now, when you start your burping and you take the lid off, you'll probably notice that the buds are going to feel more moist than when you put them in. And that's just because in the center of the bud, there's going to be some moisture retention that's going to get released, so it will re-moisten the bud slightly. Now, if you take your lid off and you see condensation on the side of the liner and your buds are just feeling really wet, you may want to go back to drying. Maybe just spread them out somewhere, let them dry, or it may be enough to put your tote back in your drying room in that environment and just leave the lid off for a while and come in every 45 minutes to an hour, mix them up, and do that until you feel some of that moisture come out. But if you have the snapping stems, shouldn't be an issue. Now, once we do that, 3 to 4 minutes, the lid's gonna go back on, boom, and we're back to cure. So at the beginning, every 3 to 4 hours, 3 to 4 minutes. As you go along and you notice that the buds aren't bringing back much moisture when you're going to burp, you can lessen it to once a day for 3 to 4 minutes until we get to the end. So from there, you're ready to move on to the next stage. Okay, step 3 of the process is trimming. Now, we call it step 3, but it's really done simultaneously with step 2. And this is one of the ways that we condense that post-harvest processing time down to that 10 to 14 day window. Is immediately upon bucking down into your tote, you're going to begin trimming. But we only want to trim out of one tote or the least amount of totes we have to open at a time. The rest we want to keep in that curing process. Now, the tote that we're going to work out of, obviously we got to open it, and so this is going to count for this tote's burping. It's going to be an extended burp. Your trim crew is going to work out of here. They're going to trim the buds up. Upon being trimmed, we're going to put them back into the tote. Now, obviously we're not going to mix them back in with untrimmed buds, but we work through a tote, or you have another tote lined. As you trim through this one, it goes into that tote. Once they're trimmed, they go straight back into the cure and burp process that we talked about in step number 2. Now, once you get through trimming all your cannabis, it's in totes, it's curing, burping, and you're going to keep curing and burping until you get to that desired dry level, which will probably be about another 5 to 7 days. And again, in the beginning, we want to be burping every 3 to 4 hours for 3 to 4 minutes. As less and less moisture starts coming back, we can lessen that down till we're just burping once a day. And from there, you're ready to move on to the next step. Okay, now we're on to step 4, which is going to be the packaging and or the dry curing process. And a lot of times this happens simultaneously. So now we have totes full of dried, cured buds. We're at about that 10 to 14 day mark. And now it's time for the cannabis to go out the door and get sold, or maybe you want to extend the curing process into a dry cure. At this point, we can move them out of the totes, and if you're going to do a dry cure, you want to move them into an airtight environment. Now, storing and showing cannabis in turkeys is great. Turkey bags are a great way to show it to buyers, for them to look at, get that bag appeal, open it up. But it's a terrible way to dry cure, it's a terrible way to store, just because no turkey bag is airtight. So you're going to have that air transfer, which we don't want at this point because we've already completed the drying process. So if you are going to store in turkey bags, which is great, what we want to do is we either want to keep those turkeys inside sealed totes, or we have our Space Saver bags, which is a great product. It's a large bag. It's got a resealable top, Ziploc. You open it up, this will actually fit 25 pounds of turkey bag units. This valve right here screws off. Take a vacuum cleaner or a shop vac, vacuum it down, and you have an airtight environment to store your turkeys in. Then when you need to show them, just pop it open and they come right out. And then finally, guys, if you're going to go into a long-term storage, maybe you don't have a buyer lined up, or maybe you want to do that dry cure for an extended amount of time, whatever the reason, if you're going to go into a long-term storage, again, we don't recommend turkey bags by themselves. If you're going to use turkey bags, please vacuum seal them in one of ours, or the next best option would be inside a tote. Another great option, of course, is vacuum bags. Anything like that. You want that airtight environment moving forward. Now, one little trick of the trade is if you are doing a dry cure or have been storing for a while and you're going to go show your cannabis, do a burp about an hour or two before you show that cannabis. It's going to refresh that nose. So when the buyer or whoever you're showing it to pops that bag open, it's going to hit them heavier than something that's been sealed up for a long time. So that is the 454 10 to 14 day dry, cure, trim, out the door process. If you guys have any questions, shoot us an email, ask them down below, and we can answer stuff specific to your cultivation. All right, guys, have a good one.